to Planet Poet Words in Space. I'm your host, Sharon Israel, and it's my special pleasure to welcome my guest, the remarkable poet and teacher, Geoffrey Nutter, by phone from Manhattan. Hi, Geoffrey.
Hi, Sharon.
How are you?
I'm doing well, thank you.
Thanks for being on the show. And Geoffrey will read from and discuss his latest poetry collection, Giant Moth Perishes, from Wave Books from this year, and share, I must say, his brilliance and exuberance about poetry and living in this world. And I am so happy to have Geoffrey on. He is a mentor, a new poetry mentor and magician of mine for the last year and a half at Wallson Glass. And Geoffrey, I want to share your bio with everybody, so it'll take about a minute. Geoffrey Nutter is the author of Giant Moth Perishes, as I said, a summer evening winner of the 2001 Colorado Prize, Waters, Leaves, and Other Poems winner of the 2004 Verse Press Prize, Christopher Sunset, winner of the 2011 Sheila Motton Book Award, The Rose of January, Wave Books 2013, and Cities at Dawn, Wave Books 2016. He recently traveled in China, giving lectures, workshops, and readings as a participant in the Yat-sen University Writers' Residency. Geoffrey's poems have been translated into Spanish, French, and Mandarin. Soir, a bilingual edition of his poems, translated into French by poets Lou Freeman and Julien Marcland, was recently published in France. And a German translation of his poems, of his book, Waters, Leaves, and Other Poems, will appear in 2021. He has taught poetry at Princeton, Columbia, University of Iowa, NYU, the New School, and 92nd Street Y. He currently teaches Greek and Latin classics at Queens College. And most importantly to me, well, that's terrible, he runs the Wallson Glass Poetry Seminars in New York City. So welcome again, Geoffrey. I know you just taught a class this morning. Am I right?
Yes, I did. Taught a couple.
Oh, two. So thanks for being here. And why don't you start?
Sure.
Why don't you start us off from a poem from your new book?
Okay, I will. This is called Fireworks. Okay, time rain, waterfall. Catherine wheel spins for the Tsarina. Ring pledges troth. Chrysanthemum cultivated for fire. Flying diamond, cut by the lapidary, winged. Strobe and bangle fire for the polity. Triangular chrysanthemum, prismatic summer storm. Jumbo Saturn, flying gem, color bomb, and Roman candle. Fly, aeroplanist, fly to SeaWorld. Spinning flash, Mahatma, spin blue flax for fustian. Peony, friendship sails, lotus blossoms near constellation Swan. A spinning flash, a cherry flash, Confucius, reckoning barrage. Great sentinel fires seen from space, flying wheel, tricolor fountain placed upright on soft earth and ignited. Biplane and dragonfly, sparrow and lacrosse, stone of red and gentle mighty. The fiery Tamerlane of happiness has its incessant day in the sun. Orioles sing for its return.
Thank you. It was Geoffrey Nutter singing, actually, his poem, Fireworks, from his new book, Giant Moth Perishes. May I say that has many, many extraordinary images in it, Geoffrey. Can you talk about imagery a little bit in your poem?
Sure. Yeah, that poem is kind of a strange one. I've never read that poem out loud to anyone before, but you sort of suggested it, so I thought, that could be worth reading. It's really a kind of a list poem with many actual names of fireworks in it, which I sort of saw this group of names of fireworks, and they seem very beautiful. But it kind of moves on to other places also, into names of sort of missiles that were used in the beginning of the arms race between us and the Soviets, and some other things as well. So it kind of like something I try to do in all of my poems is kind of move somewhere else,
right.
Beyond sort of what I start with. Yeah, but images are very important in my poems. I just love images, love things.
The flying gem, the Roman candle, the flying diamond, the lotus blossoms, and then you go to the flying wheel, biplane, and dragonfly. It sounds so compelling and encompassing. So whatever the meaning is, we can read this a few times, but then you say,
right.
Orioles sing for its return, and
right.
is that the return of happiness?
Yeah, I'm not really sure. Right, and then writing the poem, sort of the names of these fireworks sort of suggested other things to me, and sort of, right, and the Orioles, that's not the name of a firework, and the last several things aren't named of fireworks either. So,
but they all fly. Everything flies, more or
yes,
less.
Yes, they all fly, right.
And it sort of levitates the poem. The poem flies.
That's good. That's part of sort of, using a poem with sort of sound things, which much of that poem is, as I said, is making sure that things are arranged in such a way that there is still a music to it, because the sound is very important.
And movement. There's a lot of why is there such movement in that poem? There's a lot of movement.
Oh, that's good. I'm glad to hear that. I don't know, except for I was pretty careful about again the lines and the arrangement of words. Right.
Yeah, they move forward. Would you read the titular poem of the book, Giant Moth Perishes?
Yeah, sure, definitely. Okay. Giant Moth Perishes. Giant Moth Perishes. This was what the exorcists listened to when staring into space. And to think that even small praises, very small, are wrought among vines and Syrian jars, and upon the jars of Persia, and birds are in the vines among the praises, calling down among the nightshades where the giant moth perishes, and she brushes the enormous infrastructure with her wings.
That's Geoffrey Nutter reading Giant Moth Perishes. It's such a poignant poem. There's so much sadness in there, perishing in sadness. And
thank you. Thank you.
Yes. Could you discuss the title, where you got the title of the book from and the poem?
Yeah. So the title is the name of a piece by my very good friend, actually my oldest friend. We've been friends since high school, Brent Arnold, and his work can easily be found online. But that's the name of a piece from one of his records, and I've listened to the piece and I've seen the name over the years, and it's one of those things. The title seemed so much like something I would write that it just seemed perfect, and I asked Brent if I could borrow it, and he was happy to let me borrow that.
Right, it's the title of one of the cuts on his album, correct?
Yes, exactly, right. So it's not exactly anything about the actual song, right?
No,
but it was just the words themselves, right?
Well, the song itself has cello in it. It's kind of ambient, also.
Yes,
it's a perfect
for sure.
It's but and to think that even small praises, very small, are wrought among vines on Syrian jars and upon the jars of Persia. It's such a beautiful line. And
well, it sounds nice when you say it.
Oh, thank you.
Go ahead.
And Pamela Mache Pierce will be here. She's our poet at large. Once told me she described your poems as a storytelling without storytelling. It's sort of transporting. It takes you, like you said about the poem. It starts in one place and leaves you in another place. And I want to read to you, to everybody, a quote from Wave Books, who is the publisher of Geoffrey's Giant Moth Perishes. With exquisite detail and humble sensibilities, Geoffrey Nutter's sixth collection of poetry offers myriad delights in language and the imagination. In cityscapes, nature, books, and color, we find respite in the complexities of the commonplace, from clocks to teardrops to moths, Here are poems that teach us how to live in the world with curious attention. And at the heart of this daydreaming is a spectacular earnestness firmly embedded in the idea that the landscape of poetry is limitless and wild. I think it's a great description of your book.
Yeah, they did a very nice job with that. That's very nice to hear that. Yes.
Geoffrey, when did you start writing Giant Moth Perishes?
Well, there's kind of an overlap happens between books, but I think around 2016 probably, and it's really the book that a long time passed between the publication of that and Cities at Dawn, longer than I would have liked actually, because I ended up just writing and rewriting so many times and kind of working it over so much. So yeah, it was kind of laborious, this one.
It's got a lot of structure that's sort of unseen also, but did you finish the book before the pandemic or during the pandemic?
Yeah, I finished the book before the pandemic. You know, a pretty good amount of time passes between finishing the book and you're finally seeing the thing in real life published and out there in book form. So yeah, it was well before the pandemic, and oddly, it was so hard to write during the pandemic for some reason.
But Geoffrey, your influences. Everybody asks poets, what are your influences?
Sure.
And that's so difficult to say, but please go ahead and just tell us a little bit about that.
Sure. I really, for years, I love to read haiku. I feel like I'm very influenced by haiku, by the imagery and the simplicity of haiku, since I think, poetry should be, simple in a way, simple. The ancient Chinese poets, the Tang Dynasty poets, I've been influenced by, and I love reading metaphysical poetry of the 17th century, like Traherne and Henry Vaughan and Crashaw, definitely. And as far as 20th century poets, Bishop and Ashbery and Stevens and Jose Garcia Villa and Marianne Moore, and are some influences. And then now, it's like much of what I enjoy reading are my close friends and my students. One of my big influences was my very dear friend David Freeman, whose work everyone should look at and look for and read, who died of COVID a few months ago. Yeah. But his wonderful, wonderful work.
You kindly sent me some of his books. They're very quirky, eccentric, and very alive.
Yeah.
Very alive.
Yeah.
And also, you have. Could you tell me about your love of lists? Because I think that's part of your life, and you just came out with this great article in Fence Digest, the Compendium of Dream Books, a short essay about lists. Would you talk to us about?
Sure.
That?
Many years ago, I discovered, a little botanica in Manhattan, I think in Harlem, these little books called dream books. And they're really made for gamblers, right? For this gambling game, they call it. And now I can't. Policy, kind of a lotto game, kind of an underground lotto game. And these books consist of lists of words, and followed by numbers. And you are supposed, you have a dream, and you dream of an image, and then you look up the word for it, and you play the corresponding number in the lotto, etc. But the books are so beautiful, kind of, physically they're these odd, slightly sinister-looking things, but these lists of concrete words, which are so sort of beautiful when read together. So this is something I love. For some reason, I don't know why. I guess I try to dig into a little bit in the essay, but really a kind of a compulsion, like most things with poetry.
You talk about the importance of wandering, which I think is, since the pandemic also, and since the internet, I think there's a lot less wandering going on. But you wander into these lists, and these little books, they're also very tiny books. In the article, you talk about how these books should be hidden. And you have compiled the Wallson Glass Compendium, which I have, and I have a few copies of them now that I'm going to put in various places and carry them with me. It's very tiny. So you can, put them in your bag or your pocket and just look at them and write. Could you talk about the compendium a little bit?
Sure. So the compendium is just like a little pamphlet that I started making a few years ago and kind of added to it. And it's just a book of lists. It's sort of meant to be sort of an aid to writing in a way. Like you can sort of open it up and get some random, scraps of language from it. One of the criteria for inclusion, into the book is that the list can't have any sort of educational value, right? It's not like a list of the highest mountains in the world or something. They're just very useless lists. And then there are also scraps of things like lists of comic book drugs and lists of 1970s science fiction movies, and then parts of Alexander Pope's letter to a friend describing his grotto. So it's a real miscellany, a real collection of things. And part of it is I guess, inspired by, these dream books, but also things like, the Cabinets of Curiosity that were so popular in the 17th century, which are just sort of jumbled collections of strange things. It is sort of meant, because there's no index and no table of contents. It's meant to be just sort of wandered through. So there is an importance, the idea of wandering, definitely.
Well, wandering through the compendium, absolutely. You can get lost in it.
Yeah. Right. Oh, good.
And odd lists of plants, and we all use that in the Wallson Glass Seminars, which I am so happy to be part of. And would you tell us what does Wallson Glass mean? Where did you get that title from, Geoffrey?
Well, I can't quite remember. I know that in my first book, I have the name somewhere, Austin Wallson. For some reason, I started writing in maybe the early 90s under this weird sort of heteronym, Austin Wallson. So when I was trying to figure out a name for these seminars, I did not want it to be Geoffrey Nutter's poetry seminar. I didn't want to have a website called geoffreynutter.com.
Right.
I wanted all responsibility to be directed away from me. So I wanted the power of, what is it called, plausible deniability, but also have it, be this kind of shadowy character, Wallson Glass, rather than me. So
well, it is mysterious, and if you go on the Wallson Glass site, you have these animations, these little videos, these silent videos that are very surreal. They're wonderful. They're dreamy, and the title also. It's like the compendia, and these lists that you wander through. There's a bit of mystery, and what you said, they're sort of sinister, and you can sort of like pray to them and wish on them, And they're illogical, and they have no goal. And so, when did you start conducting these seminars?
First of all, I want to say that what you just described sort of is perfect description of what I think poems should be. So kind of dreamlike, kind of illogical or wandering, maybe vaguely sinister. And what was the question when I started conducting these? Was that your question? Yeah. It was around 2013. Yeah, and it started as like a series of workshops. Like I was going to do 6-week workshops. I did a couple of these. And then someone mentioned that, they went to this thing that was just sort of a day of writing with a group of friends or something. And then I decided this is kind of something I've done with a friend, just spending a few hours writing together, and how fun that would be to do in a group. So I sort of changed it from an ordinary workshop to just like these all-day writing sessions, and sometimes all night. And people seem to like it. I certainly did. I certainly do.
And you, I'm so thankful that you decided to keep them going in a different form by Zoom during the pandemic. And when did you start that?
That's something, I started that actually the very first weekend of the pandemic, the very first weekend of the shutdown. I started doing it, and I did it for 18 Saturdays in a row. I
was in 16 of them, I think.
Oh, that's great. I remember you're a regular.
Yeah.
I mean, this is one of those results, these unexpected results of something, a good thing that came out of it. I never thought that these things could be done online. Only 11 people can fit into my living room of my small Manhattan apartment. So in this way, I just had people coming from all over the world. People coming from Europe, and so in that way, it's really great.
It's quite extraordinary. I was supposed to attend in person with Pamela Marche Pierce, and Pamela says you have to go to Geoffrey Nutter's house. You have these you're around the table, and there's all these books that you consult, and you just go around and read, and it's whatever she said. I said yes, and then right before everything shut down. But you have managed to create this very welcoming environment on Zoom, which is. It sounds oxymoronic, but it's not. You've also mastered getting many more lists to us, the compendia and videos. It's sort of, I don't know if it's expanded what you did in when you were in your home doing it, but it sort of intensifies this wandering where you just sit in one place and you have the world coming to us. And especially one of the oddest things is when you have videos of manufacturing processes.
Right.
You say, write about this, and could you talk a little bit about the violence in those processes and how it works for poetry?
Oh, sure, right. I mean, I guess I originally started doing something like that, where I would sort of have people imagine the manufacturing process behind something, and just sort of. I think I talked about that in relation to Ovid's Metamorphoses, and just sort of, the idea of trying to empathize or trying to imaginative projection, but also, yes, the idea of like the creation of something involves all kinds of contingencies, all kinds of things from the world, and a kind of violence, a lot of violence actually. And also the things that we use in our everyday lives are, again, like the intersection of so many forces and so many unknown things and people in different places. And, sort of unavoidably this kind of political dimension sort of starts creeping in when you talk about it and think about it. But no, I love the videos, especially the ones like making honey and making silk, where you take these... Oh, you take these small animals, this thing that people have been doing for thousands of years, and these worms, and go through this whole process of transformation. I think it's quite exciting and beautiful, and very much lends itself, not only to ideas, in poems, but also just the idea of like processes of transformation.
Right, and you unveil the mystery of the process, but still, if you tell us to look at things describe things objectively, and the sort of mystery and subjective emerges even from just the subjective, and you prepare us with these very fast exercises that you sort of want us to be a little mindless when we do these. That's a wrong word, but.
No, that's exactly kind of exactly it, right?
And the séance. You have a séance session once in a while at midnight, which was really we were even more exhausted than we usually are. So unusual things came out.
Yeah, that was kind of the point of the séance, and I should say it's not an actual séance. I'm not. I'm sort of afraid of doing anything to tempt the dark forces, but
right. There's no Ouija boards. We're the poets of the Ouijas, of the Ouija boards.
Exactly. It's just a late night, like an all-nighter writing session, where the purpose is to get kind of hypnagogic and a little bit into a little bit of an altered state.
Right.
Yeah.
The hypnagogic state is between waking and sleeping.
Yes. Yes, exactly.
And now, bringing us the latest poetry news and the latest in poetic insights is our poet at large, poet and visual artist Pamela Marche Pierce, joining us by phone, also from Manhattan. And 3 of Pamela's collages have been chosen for publication in Paris Lit Up magazine, Paris. These artworks from her series Skin Hunger combine texts from poems of Walter Benton, From Never a Greater Need, and odes from elegant extracts, British poets, 1823, and images. Hello, Pamela.
Hello, Sharon. Hello, Geoffrey. It feels like home plate to be with the two of you today. It's wonderful.
So nice to hear your voice,
Pamela. It's great. I also come to these seminars. That's how I met you, Geoffrey. And as I was preparing for today, I decided I'm coming up with my fantasy session, which you're going to give us to work with, and this is it. I'd like to see a lot of boiling black rubber to make tires. I'd like to show us text from a 17th century guide to performing an appendectomy and a recording of the early works of Little Richard.
There we go. All put together, all spliced together, right? Hopefully.
Yes. So it's always a revelation to me, and my writing has changed. I've been writing poetry since I'm 14, which is a really long time.
Oh wow!
I discovered Sarah Teasdale and Amy Lowell. What I wanted to do today is I'm going to read a poem, one that I wrote having come under your influence and doing this kind of alchemy. I think that it is alchemy of drawing on all these different resources and coming up with and turning them turning it into something in a kind of gold that we do. So, and this is called Scenic Mountain Portrait of a Couple in Sunglasses. ThriftStoreArt.com, Gallery 13. Is it us? We don't belong in thrift shop art. We do belong holding each other in the snow. Hold me close now and never let me go. Our starched clothes do nothing to hold us back. Fire rages inside our thick winter layers. Hold me close now and never let me go. I love the hair smell in your old-fashioned fedora. I put my whole face in it, and it fits perfectly. My comfy T-strap shoes are so very prim. You lick the leather clean of melted snow. Hold me close now and never let me go. Like container ships, we are full of surprises.
Wow.
Lovely.
That's great.
Oh, I have really grown as a poet thanks to you, Geoffrey. I mean, I've learned how to use materials in similar ways to my collage making.
I love your work. I love your work, Pamela.
Oh, Geoffrey, thank you. Thank you very much.
It's so beautiful. And
go ahead, Sharon.
And
Sorry.
Jeffrey introduced us to these thrift art websites, and they're really strange because, like with your poem, Pamela, there's a poignancy that's very odd about it, and it's about objectively writing down what you see in these without being judgmental on these sites.
Oh yeah,
exactly. And there's so much mystery in the relationship of these two people, and it's very exciting to work with these different materials that I would never think of putting together or going to. And when I think we mentioned it last week, when you think about ekphrastic art, you think about the Bronzino or the Picasso. You don't think about this work in the thrift store store art gallery.
Well, with as you, Geoffrey, had mentioned, the earnestness with these pictures are not made ironically. They're very earnestly created.
Yes. With
real emotion, and it's that's a great comparison.
Exactly, and I mean, and when we work in the way that you've shown us, Geoffrey, and make available to us, I mean, we're really opening our own consciousness and also that of our reader. We're allowing lots and lots of space for other people, for associations that are not ours, and it creates all this wonderful mystery as we transform these different. In my mind, they're materials. It's the same thing as when I'm making art. So.
Wow, great! I'd love to hear that. Yeah.
Well, Pamela, thank you so much.
Thank you
for your wonderful contribution. You're poet at large, and that's.
Thank you, Pamela.
I loved it. It was absolutely wonderful to be with the two of you, and I look forward to seeing you not this coming Saturday, but the next Saturday, I hope, Geoffrey.
Excellent. Looking forward, Pamela.
All right, take care. Thanks a lot.
Thank
and now
you,
I'm
Pamela.
just going to be a listener.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Yeah, this is like a sort of a continuation of our conversations on Zoom, but I think that the thrift art, the thrift store art, is one of the most unusual prompts that you have given us, Geoffrey. And have you always known about Keane paintings and have an interest in Bob Ross, etc.?
Not always. I pretty recent, I think. But I've been using. I mean, for the last couple of years, I think several times I've used Bob Ross videos as sort of prompts or things to write along with, because it's so sort of. I think there's a lot of Bob Ross fans out there, because he's talking through this process as he's making a painting, and it's very, there's humor in it, and there's great love, and there's also sort of these comments about the creative process, and there's a lot of license he gives. So yeah, I love that. Of course, his voice and
his voice and the sounds of the paintbrush on the canvas.
Oh, sure.
All these
absolutely.
Things. But
the physicality. And the thrift store. I mean, I like to write about images and guide people through writing about images. But writing about if you're going to write about a Picasso or something, or a Matisse painting, there's all of this kind of freight that comes with it, right?
Yes.
It's like trying to write when you have like a Beethoven Lake Quartet in the background.
That's
or something, right?
You had mentioned
borrowing all of this beauty. Yes. Something I used to do but don't do anymore, right?
Borrowed genius. Well, it's very inspiring, but then what's that inspiration really? What does it have to do with the poetry? It's I don't know. I think it's like an exercise in looking at thrift store art to be objective. To be objective, and it's hard.
Good.
It's very hard to do it. I feel. But.
Yeah, I mean, I guess part, not being sort of swept up by the beauty,
yes,
I guess.
Yes.
But trying to be more objective. I mean, I've thought about this sort of a lot lately, like, this kind of difference between objectivity and, an emotion, and, how does one make art and look at it, sort of informed by these ideas of, do you want to affect the emotions? What kind of emotions do you feel when you look at art? Is poetry just about swaying the emotions? And I think at its best, there's a kind of coldness to it almost. That sounds kind of awful, but right, there's a different kind of beauty that we're talking about with poetry, definitely, which is why I don't listen to Beethoven's Lake Quartets anymore. I certainly do, actually, just not when I'm writing.
Right.
I don't want to get, swept up in the great, intense emotion that something like that. I'm not going to write Strauss's 4 last songs, for example. You end up thinking that you've written the most beautiful thing that's ever been written in the history of the world, and then you look at it later and say, no, actually, Strauss wrote the most beautiful songs in the history of the world.
It's true. I totally agree.
The world seemed beautiful while I was listening to that. Yeah.
My husband will agree to that. They are sublime. They are sublime.
Yeah.
And along with De Rosenkavalier, it's total sublimity.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Do you listen to any music when you write?
Yeah, I do, much less than the past, but I'll listen to stuff that's fairly sort of neutral.
Yeah,
maybe I'll listen to Bach keyboard or even like other sort of Baroque stuff, right? So Telemann or Rameau or something, right? Again, not something that's gonna kind of sweep you up,
right?
This emotional world,
Geoffrey,
but something beautiful nonetheless. Sorry, go ahead.
Right, in its own way, it's sort of distilled, distilled experience. Would you read one of your new poems that you're working on, Geoffrey?
Oh, yes, I can. Okay, let's do this. A Rolling Stone. This is called the Saturn Year so far. A Rolling Stone follows no moss. A Rolling Stone gathers ideas around it that throws off contradictory messages. These you might see, but still not understand. You feel them for what it's worth. But what else is there? It is dark beneath the lighthouse of the flower next door under the drift of the planets, which are everywhere. We're at least open to the possibility, even if only in our best moments, like a door that has been blocked by some large object on the other side. And the leaves of the tea are coarse, but the water soaks through like diamonds, which for us, most of us, is enough. while even parents and children are strangers. And a valley of sea crystals also lies in mountain shadows at certain times of day, when the wind is in the pines and the clouds are old as the hills. When you see them at sunset, it's as if the firemen and the mindmen have joined forces, and Veneta A. Koff lavishes attention on the colonel's lamentable sobriety, and civilization dreams among the cannonry, dreams the sea dream, dreams the ocean dream, dreams the moon dream with its dark side ever turned away from you. Now along the sloping walls of the College of Optometry, Dr. Rainbow avoids, if only for a moment, the strange but pleasant, the small but vast responsibilities presented by the iris and the lens, the latch with which one can open any door, like the breeze coming down across, linearly through the tall, cool buildings. Not so far from here, it pushes the plant ships into the harbor and out to sea, where they wander for a single changing of the seasons. But they are the seasons of a Saturn year, each of which is 127 years long, with a rush of violet and transparent leaves that are brushing your cheek like a tear.
Wow.
There it is.
That's a Saturn year by Geoffrey Nutter. Wow. I don't know what else to say. That's the gorgeousness of that. You start,
oh, thank you.
You start Saturn year, and then you start with a Rolling Stone, and you go to Moon Dreams, and you end up with Saturn year. But it's so interesting because you take us on this trip down into the sea and wherever the images roll like a stone. Actually, they roll through the poem, but you can't forget the echo of the first line of Rolling Stone.
Oh, good.
So it echoes. You don't need to mention it; it just echoes through that poem.
Good.
It's really. Thank you. How do you know when a poem is finished, Geoffrey?
I don't really know. I don't actually really know.
I just figured I'd ask you.
It's funny. I'm glad to hear what you said about things seeming to recall other things without actually saying it. I always feel, now that it's cheating to go back to anything from earlier in the poem. It feels unnatural somehow. It feels unorganic, and I want things to somehow feel sort of inevitable or organic, even though, of course, it's all very contrived. But the wandering too, I enjoy, and I feel like with poetry, you're able to take, the thing about myself that is sort of the worst or weakest part of myself, which is kind of the confusion of being in the world and the wandering and sort of the lack of ambition, and those are the perfect things for poetry. Those are the things that work. So turn to these things to my advantage somehow in the world of the poem.
I'm going to listen to that again when I repeat the broadcast and when it's on podcast. We'll listen to it. That wandering, the sense of organic. It's like you're building something. You're not like making a roadmap or a conscious architectural plan, but you're building something that accumulates organically. I don't know if that's correct, but that's a Saturn year. The title, did you get that from astronomy, doing research? Or?
I think so. I just have this sort of vague idea that, a year on Saturn is longer than a year on Earth. So that's why I wrote that. I don't know if a Saturn year is really 127 of our years. I don't even really understand what a year means in space. So, right? So anyway, I just kind of made that up. Yeah.
Could you give us another new one, please?
Sure.
Or
yes,
whatever you'd like to read.
Okay, this is either called The First and Last Snow or Men Without Qualities. Let's see. So, Trevor, Tristan, and Siegfried. The three were standing in the woods one spring day in 1926 or 1931, arguing ethics, disputing metaphysics. Is everything indeed permissible? The storm is brewing, presaging an hour of underneathness, and they are listless, just wandering then into the grass like a church mouse, into a grass church, or mousemen into the grass. It is a tall church with people in it, and they were telling of the Gothic cathedral that had tentacles wrapped around it, 8 at least, and each engaged in its own separate deed. They so fussily touch the brickwork and the stone as seen through lenses bright in the marvelous distance. As it is impossible for a train to wander, so it is equally certain that the stars will shine through the arches 2 or 3 times per summer, then move on, and the leaves and their shadows seem to fall into place as they thrash in the wind, finding patterns like the beads in a kaleidoscope. The poison oak shivers in the cool, dark shade. I invite you to join me for the timely boiling of the leaves, our hearts close to each other's physically and otherwise. The quartz is vanishing, then materializing again, much closer to us. The motorway expands to accommodate a cyclops. Cousins play before the nest, and the blue Mormon butterfly is resting on a branch near a path by the running stream. Then their hearts are strengthened or hardened like a wheel, and the incandescent milk imparts its sweet fragrance. That's it.
Wow. That's men without qualities or men with qualities?
Yes.
There's more wandering. I love the way you said it in 1930, 1931. But
yeah.
It's hard to talk about a poem that just my first impressions. I mean, the cathedral with tentacles around it, the tentacles squeezing it. It's sort of a very Lovecraftian image of awful monster.
Yeah, I didn't even think of that.
Monster, and the confinement, and then you talk about everything else is released. You're the running stream, and it starts again. I don't know. Do you want to read it one more time?
Read the same poem one more time?
Yeah.
Yeah, I would love to. Sure.
Please.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Trevor, Tristan, and Siegfried, the 3 were standing in the woods one spring day in 1926 or 31, arguing ethics, disputing metaphysics. Is everything indeed permissible? The storm is brewing, presaging an hour of underneathness, and they are listless, just wandering then into the grass like a church mouse, into a grass church, or mousemen into the grass. It is a tall church with people in it, and they were telling of the Gothic cathedral that had tentacles wrapped around it. 8, at least, and each engaged in its separate deed. They so fussily touched the brickwork and the stone as seen through lenses bright in the marvelous distance. As it is impossible for a train to wander, so it is equally certain that the stars will shine through the arches 2 or 3 times per summer, then move on, and the leaves and their shadows seem to fall into place as they thrash in the wind, finding patterns like the beads in a kaleidoscope. The poison oak shivers in the cool, dark shade. I invite you to join me for the timely boiling of the leaves, our hearts close to each other, physically and otherwise. The quartz is vanishing, then materializing again. Then much closer to us, the motorway expands to accommodate a cyclops. Cousins play before the nest, and the blue Mormon butterfly is resting on a branch near a path by the running stream. Then their hearts are strengthened, or hardened like a wheel, and the incandescent milk imparts its sweet fragrance. That's it.
Thank you, Geoffrey. I've got so much more out of the second time. It's
thank you.
It's a lot in there. We're running out of time. Geoffrey, would you tell us some links that you'd like us to know for the Fence article, for Wallson Glass, perhaps, and for your books?
Yes, sure. For Wallson Glass, if anyone is curious, you can just go to wallsonglass.com. WALLSONGLASS, Wallson Glass is how it sounds. And the essay on the compendium and lists is, you could go to the Fence digital portal. So go to Fence Digital, Fence Magazine, the fantastic poetry journal Fence. And it's there in their feature called Electment. There's a feature that's run by the poet Emily Wallace Hughes called Electment. So you can look for that, ELECMENT. And what was the other thing? Oh, and if you're interested in Giant Moth Perishes, it's in Wave Books. You can find it at wavepoetry.com.
Geoffrey, thank you so much. This has been such a great pleasure and privilege for me to have you on the show. And
it's been so fun.
I hope you enjoyed it. Thank you. And I'm sure
yeah.
our listeners, their minds are expanded. Minds and hearts.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. And thank you to Pamela Moshe Pierce. And thank you all for listening.